Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Race Equality Week webinar entitled Actions Speak Louder Than Words, Solutions and Trends in Tackling Race Inequality in the Workplace. My name is Wali Rahman, and I'm an Inclusion and Diversity Consultant at Wiltshire Council. So first of all, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone that has chosen to join us today. And as this is a jointly hosted event, this welcome comes from everyone from our partner organisations as well. So whilst this is a relatively closed session, we are keen to engage with you as much as possible. And as such, we'd like to point you to the chat box where you can say hi and tell us where you're joining us from. I know some of you have already started to do that, so thanks for doing that. Can we just ask you to keep your points polite and concise, and most of all, respectful to our speakers and colleagues. We're not planning to take questions directly from the audience using the chat, unfortunately, due to the lack of time and the number of people on this call. So rather, we've selected some questions which were submitted to us prior to the event, and we will try to answer as many of these as we can during the Q&A segment of the webinar. Let me also remind you that there are closed captions available if you need them, and you can find those at the top of your Microsoft Teams app or browser with the 3 dots, and go down and select closed captions. And as I mentioned at the start, we are recording this session, so please be advised. And if you want to switch off your cameras, that's absolutely fine. But otherwise, keep them on as it helps with interaction. I would now like to welcome Andy Brown, Corporate Director for Resources and Deputy Chief Executive of Wiltshire Council. Andy will say a few words to welcome you all and to introduce our speakers. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Wally. So hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar as part of Race Equality Week. So I'd like to say inclusion and diversity are really important to us at Wiltshire Council and a key part of the council's identity. It reflects who we are and how we work together to deliver our services. We recognise the importance of a diverse workforce, and we're committed to ensuring we can create an inclusive workplace where everyone feels welcomed and valued. One of the many ways we are doing this is through education and awareness raising, including the courses and events that we run. Our Black History Month event last October, which we worked with our partners to deliver, was a great example of this. The event attracted over 2,000 people from all over the world, and we received some great feedback and lots of commitment from people to take action with regards to tackling racial discrimination and bias. Just a few examples that we've had in terms of that feedback. There's one feedback that's we're saying that continue to have open and honest discussions about race relations in the UK and the wider world at any opportunity I get. By breaking down the barriers of ignorance, we can begin to make inroads and create more familiar relationships, allies around us. So there were some really great messages that we had. One particular feedback I pointed out and I took was that it gives the opportunity to talk more about race and Black history in particular with my children. And I think that was one that really struck home with me in terms of some of the events that we're holding. It shows the impact of those events. It's far-reaching, and the conversations that must continue well beyond Black History Month or any other event. So Race Equality Week gives us that opportunity. It's an annual UK-wide movement uniting thousands of organisations and individuals to address the barriers to race equality in the workplace. I'm proud that we, along with our partners, are part of that positive movement. So it gives me great pleasure to have speaking to us today the co-founders of Race Equality Matters and Race Equality Week, Raj, Tulsiani and Javed Thomas. Raj has become one of the UK's leading figures in executive search, interim management, workforce planning and diversification. He has over 20 years of experience moving the dial on leadership, talent and diversity, and is the author of Diversity and Inclusion for Leaders, making a difference with the diversity headhunter. As one of the most respected and disruptive figures internationally in these fields, Raj advises boards and change agents across the public and private sectors on diversity and talent. He sits on a number of boards, including the Metropolitan Police. Javed is co-founder of Race Equality Matters and founder of the Collaboratory, a network of businesses and non-profit organisations that come together to create change and help solve the problems that really matter. With nearly 10 years expertise in diversity and inclusion with a solutions focus, most recently was the architect behind Race Equality Week. From a blank piece of paper, the inaugural week was co-created by those with lived experiences and took place in February 2021. With more than 2,000 organisations pan-sector engaged, 94% recommending Race Equality Week 2022 to others. With the theme of Race Equality Week being action, not just words, Raj will talk first about why now more than ever organisations need to address race inequality in the workplace. You will also hear about current trends and best practice. Raj will be followed by Javed, who will introduce some of the solutions they have co-created with those with lived experience that are making a difference in tackling race inequality. We'll then have a question and answer session where Raj and Javed will answer some of the questions that were sent in by the audience. So without further ado, I can welcome Raj Tulsiani. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Nice to be here today. So if we go to the first slide, please. The basic principle of what we're going to do today is to give you some data and insight into what we've experienced. And that's not just us, it's the 5,000 companies who support or take part in Race Equality Matters. As Green Park, we have been moving this dial for 16 years, and my goodness, we've learned some lessons, particularly from the 75 ethnic minorities we put on boards last year. Each one of those was its own tale. And we work with public and private sector organisations all the way from small charities through to housing associations. Central government is huge for us. And right at the other end, we're with HSBC, Google, Facebook, etc. So what we're trying to do is share good practice. And just because it works well in one organisation doesn't mean you can cut and paste it in yours. But our principal activity here is to ensure that people who want to be allies or people who want to make their organisation more relevant to their service users have access to the tools that are working elsewhere. Doesn't mean they can cut and paste it, doesn't mean their culture won't have to adapt, doesn't mean their attitudes and leadership behaviours won't have to grow. But our role is to show you how it can be done if you really want to do it. So we're not here for a moral case, but we're here simply because we think the UK as a productivity issue, and if we can increase inclusion, we can increase engagement, and that will increase productivity as well as increasing relevance to service users and customers. So when we started this, the first piece of research we did in the summer of 2020, when we were desperate to find some way of finding something positive out of the George Floyd murder and the kind of corporate arm wringing and in some cases tokenistic responses where they said how important Black lives were, but Black careers and Black pay and equality in the workplace was still something that the will to do something about was increasing, but the skill and budget to do something about it remained the same at best. So in those days, it was normal for 75% of ethnic minorities to experience racism in the workplace. As Wally said right at the beginning, you know, we can probably do better than going back to normal. Slide, please. So we've done a lot of research, both as Green Park and Race Equality Matters, and some of the other organisations I sit on the board for, like Heaven Help Us or Be the Business or the People's History Museum. I'm not on the Met board. I was on the Stride board for 7 years, and I stopped the day that they stopped listening to me. And I think many people on this call have probably had similar situations. And part of this research and data I'm going to share with you may empower some, it may provide empathy to others. One of the things we've been doing since 2014 is to track the top 10,000 jobs in the FTSE 100 and the top 5,000 jobs in public life. And we started doing this to look at trends around race and gender, but also to look at how efficiently organisations had been able to deliver on their promises around diversity. And now this is something that regulators and investors are looking at in the private sector. So in 2020, for the first time in 6 years, there were no Black origin CEOs, CFOs or chairs in the FTSE 100. Now, that's only important when you think, A, 75% of the money made in the FTSE 100 is made globally, but also that we were in a tide of people saying how important representation was in leadership. So for it, the bottom line to be there's nobody there in those key positions was very sobering. At that stage, 75% of people who we surveyed didn't think their organisation was inclusive. The majority of people we interviewed, and we talked to 220 business leaders, and said, amongst other questions, you know, who do you think does race equality well? And one name came up twice, and most people couldn't even say anybody. And of course, again, this is in a time where everybody had race equality on their agenda, whether it was taken seriously or not. And only one name came up twice, and that name was PwC. We worked with and contacted and started to build support networks for race equality network leads. We've now got 1,000 in the network, and they were saying not just, you know, the will to do something is increasing rapidly, but you know, I'm not supported, it's not my full-time job, I'm not a change agent, and now all of a sudden I'm being told to fix race in my organisation. So, and again, at that time, only 7% of their organisation said meaningful action for equality that was being done. Now, a lot of those stats have developed and grown. So we'll go through that slide, please. So last year we were seeing that there's progress, and at one stage, you know, confidence in progress being made had reached 63%, but then by the time we got back to November, that had gone down to 40%. So again, you know, we are investing in short-term marketing or employee value proposition techniques instead of real change management, real cultural change, real working towards a cultural and behavioural model for our leaders that actually serves our organisations and our staff in the long term. This year, 55% of people said their organisations was doing less than satisfactory. When we looked at that yesterday, with a very mixed group, what we saw is people from ethnic minorities were far more sceptical than HR people, leaders and diversity professionals. So there's still a disconnect between what's being done and what's being landed. What's being landed, of course, is what's important. So in many ways, I'm sorry to say that although as a society we've made huge progress in this and other forms of equality over the last 10 years, the reality is how people feel in organisations right now is that we're going backwards. In many cases, we're not going backwards, but because promises and narratives have been promised and expected, every 3 months where there is no progress and no change in how I'm managed, how I'm performance managed, how I'm paid, how we recruit, how we retain, what our messages are, that big thing here is that there is an emerging trust gap within many of our organisations. Slide, please. So what are the barriers? And this is again coming from our learnings at Green Park and the campaigns we support, the other minority businesses that we work with, and this Race Equality Matters network. Well, the first one seems to be bias in recruitment, progression and development. Our advice is, you know, anybody who's got a diversity recruitment strategy but doesn't have a diversity retention strategy is investing in perhaps a leaky bucket, and no one should be spending a lot of their time and money in the public sector on leaky buckets. There's far more you can use that money for that makes a real effect on people's lives. But we have to focus on attracting talent, and what we're hearing and what we're saying is how we attract talent and retain talent is absolutely key on creating a more inclusive culture. And the big, I always think, who's the most skeptical person in the room? So the most skeptical person in the room is probably saying, well, who cares? Well, why you should care is because of the issues around talent, there are issues about being relevant to your customer or your service user in a changing demographic, and critically how you're going to get settlements out of government. So we feel that all of this is part of what good leadership should look like in the future. And the skills that authentic role models and more representation at senior levels can bring around cognitive diversity means they're equally capable of moving the organisation forward today on diversity and inclusion and equity, whilst tomorrow it'll be on net zero, and before too long it'll be on other parts of social value that will be linked to how much money public sector organisations get from government and how their leaders are rewarded. So we see there's a lot of increasing activity, particularly in government, but without impact, largely because it's done in a bubble. And even great organisations like the Civil Service Race Forum are not open to the outside world, which makes me think they must think they can solve the problems themselves. And if this exists in society, then it exists in organisations. So it's difficult. In larger organisations, we often see people going to HR or to diversity and inclusion professionals for advice, but HR and diversity as functions are less diverse than many other functions in the organisation. I think Wally's left, but I'll go anyway. So that lack of responsibility and accountability means that for most of us, it's not transparent as to what people are trying to do at the top. So you get quite a lot of boiling the ocean. Unfortunately, you get a lot of leaders who are either uncomfortable talking about race or see it as a real dangerous a third rail of politics. So what we need there is authenticity, not vanilla statements and promises. Wally, I'm just going to continue until you get the slides back up, if that's okay.
Yes, I'm really sorry about that. My Teams crashed. So can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. We are all there far more often than we like. We rely on the technology, and when it doesn't work, we just have to go with it. So thank you. If I could go to the next slide, please. So again, this is based on what the market and our research and breadth of organisation is the 66th largest recruitment business in the country, and the this big Race Equality Matters network that we can leverage. What do people feel is not working? So for leaders, the biggest thing is that thank you, Rob Neal. So the biggest thing is that not being present. So leaders who come into a meeting, say their piece and then leave. Leaders who won't, commit to specific actions. Leaders who say, diversity is like super important to us. It's like it's a thing, but we're going to spend less on our diversity budget than we do on the fourth most senior person in the accounts. And critically, not being transparent about what priorities are. People aren't stupid. People know these things can't be solved in 10 minutes, and particularly not as they need to be solved in such a way that helps the organisation delivers its promises. So for leaders, people want to see that diversity dashboard, and they want to see they want the leaders to trust them enough to show real progress on it, or to show where we're getting stuck. And that was part of the idea of Race Equality Week, was that our view was that we needed to create a safe space for pause and reflection. For human resources and diversity experts, human resources, this is new to a lot of people, really. So they're applying kind of great generalist techniques to a specialist area. And then when you get to diversity experts, many of whom are not well supported, not well paid. I laugh at some of the salaries on display for really difficult, important, meaty roles in the public sector. You're not just, it's just not fair, that it's just not realistic to get people who can do that kind of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management and change management. But a lot of people who get into diversity get into it for a very passionate and personal reason. So the danger with that is that they become very focused on a single issue, And what we've seen with all of our research into race is that race is the protected characteristic that really opens up value and intersectionality because of the cultural effect and behavioural effect it has to have on the organisation. So for us, social mobility affects race, but it's not you can't swap one out for the other. Of course, gender, disability, sexual orientation, all forms of acquired and inherited diversity characteristics overlap with race, but race also needs its own focus. So what doesn't tend to work, signing charters with no action plans, unconscious bias training. I mean, why give people another place to hide? Taking no meaningful action, this whole kind of, we're going to do blind CVs. Why do I have to hide my identity to work for your firm? If you're that biased, at what time is that bias going to manifest itself? At pay time? At promotion time? So I think there's just, bad advice being given here by firms with no lack of lived experience, or ones that are too interested in protecting existing contracts to actually tell leadership what they need to hear. And worst of all, activity but no follow-up. Slide, please. So what is working? That's many of you, thank you for the claps. Many of you will be agreeing because you agree. Many of you be agreeing because they, I know this already, Raj, get onto some stuff that really helps us. So what's really working is proactive diversity and talent pipelining against your needs, against your workforce plans. Should be mapping markets, building pipelines, putting value into those pipelines based on what those communities need, being real about where they see your brand. If you've got a bad REST score, and you've got no black leadership in your trust, and you're going to go out there and go, we're a great place for you to work. People aren't stupid. They have to give a realistic pathway to getting into a better position. And the thing that also headhunters tell you is, people just walk out. It's not true. People often love their jobs, but they don't love the culture in which they work in, particularly in the public sector. So that idea of pipelining is super important, because if you go to market when you need somebody, you've already half lost. You have to go to market to build the talent pool. And remember, this is very competitive. So you have to take talent that might go elsewhere at all levels. So bringing the voice of the candidate into your conversations about recruitment, retention, and what we call value proposition, I can't tell you how important it is. You don't need highly paid consultants like me to do that. You need to apply common sense. Impact audits, are the stuff you're doing making any difference at all? Or in some cases, we work with one of the big global banks, a lot of their women programs are negative for what they're trying to do. They're actually putting people backwards. So just because it's created in a nice oak panelled room doesn't mean it's going to be real for people. In fact, the relationship with diversity spend is often people waste money because they haven't built it to create specific impact that can be measured. Work around equal pay and performance development. By that, we're talking about equality and performance management. So the systems, processes, most people have got awesome policies now, for real. But how they're implemented, how managers are supported to manage differently, how the system becomes more inclusive is very important. And then just as I hand over to my co-founder, Javed, we're going to talk you through some of the Race Equality Matters initiatives that are proven to be making a difference. And I say this, they're free. Our principle is that individuals should be able to access our tools for free. We're not for profit. We need as much help from the public sector as humanly bloody possible. But our principle is that you as an individual, whether you're an ethnic minority, an ally, a leader, whoever, should be able to access this as a part of your free membership. Next slide, please. Javed, are you happy to take over from here? I'm sure everyone's had quite enough of me.
Yeah, good. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Raj. I think I think it's really important, as you said. We know about the negativity, and it's all about creating change and shining a light on what works. And I think so. Race Equality Matters was formed after the research Raj talked about. What can we do? And there are slivers of good things happening a bit in organisation X and organisation Y, but how do we put it all together? And the feedback from those with lived experience was, yes, we want this. So we were kind of like brand new kids on the block, and then within the first month or so, sort of 250 organisations engaged, and now we're up to over 3,000 organisations engaged, which shows there's something about it. But what's really crucial is we do everything through collaboration and through the working in collaboration with those with lived experience. Everything's tried and tested, etc. As a result, Raj touched upon, we now have a race network leaders and future leaders network with over 1,500 members, 1,000 of race network leaders. But what's really important is to make sure they have the support, the environment, the skills and the tools to progress, because quite often many of us will not have certain skills that you need to go up the pipeline. So it's to remove them barriers. So that's why Race Equality Matters was formed. Thanks to the likes of Green Park, BT and other supporters, they fund this work to make it for free for individuals. So what we did want is actually someone that's really passionate to create change in their organisation. They haven't got budget. It'll take a year to get budget within their organisation, because many people tell me there's no money in race. But what we want is to skill or provide you with the tools to create change in your organisations. Next slide, please. So one of the things, is it coming? So one of the things that we picked up upon, we carried out this research on the back of the George Floyd murder, the demonstrations in the streets, and what was brilliant was everyone uniting, young, old, black, white, all cultures, all races, all backgrounds. But what people were concerned about, they thought there's real hope here. But what's going to happen 6 months down the line? We've had these moments before, and is it just going to be another moment? So that's why we created, Race Equality Matters. But then, and we knew, so this obviously was in July, we knew in October was going to be Black History Month. And I'm sure it was one of the most popular Black History Months ever for organisations doing activity. But we did find out just after that, actually, and Raj did touch upon, actually, people with lived experience said, actually, there's been performative stuff or signing a charter or this, that, and the other, but actually change isn't really happening. And I think Raj talked about measuring impact. So what we want to do is keep the momentum going. I think there's some people on here have said, keep the conversation going, keep it going, not wait another year for Black History Month. So we created Race Equality Week, and it's all about uniting individuals, organizations, pan sector, pan countries even to make things happen. So in the first one, and this was all born and turned around within about 2 to 3 months, 56% of people did say their senior leaders got involved in Race Equality Week. So that was a huge change for them when they couldn't get access or their voice to them. We provided free events, including partners like your Wiltshire creating the forum to engage with other organisations like this. So that's why Race Equality Week was formed. And the easy way to remember it, it's the first Monday every February every year. So you can have that as a recurring thing in your calendar. So there's no need to, I know you've not read our notes if you ask us when is it. It's the first Monday every February every year. Thank you. Next slide, please. So Raj talked about all this performative stuff and actually openness and transparency. And one of the solution that was created was called the Big Promise. And we looked with the Governance Forum, who created a race equality code, at over 15 race charters. And between them, there's over 200 commitments. We know organisations that signed 2, 3, 4 charters. You've got 30 commitments on your desk. What do you do? I think Rajan trying to boil the ocean, in one go. So we've run this past the community and then said, okay, of all these 200 commitments, which ones will make an impact? There's must do's, should do's, and could do's. What we also realised when we went through this, actually, there's 4 types of key stakeholders in organisations. So there's C-suite, board members that will have a different power and authority and privilege. You then also have senior leaders. Your third group is your ethnic minority community, and your fourth group is your allies. So we've created a magnificent 7 promises for each of these groups, and they're different. So depending where you sit in your organisation, you've got promises there. But what it was is we wanted people to then be open and public about it. So these are just some examples of organisations staff who have made their promise. And as you can see, it's on social media, it's out there, they can be held accountable. We carried out some research after loads of organizations had done it, and 70% of staff didn't know whether their organization had signed a race charter or not. But we knew their organization had signed a race charter. This is one way to be open. But I said the promises is not for you, me, or anyone else to come up with, I'll promise this. These have been pre-selected. So that's a really good example. The next slide, please. So another one we've created is the tea break, again, co-created with Network Rail and its Cultural Fusion Network. So they spoke at the event and the audience thought, wow, that makes a huge impact. How do we do it? So what Race Equality Matters does, it creates how to do it right guide. So a lot of what we talk about here, organization may do versions of it, but it doesn't work as Raj alluded to sometimes. So what we kind of do is we create a how to do it right guides, how to do it right workshops, and also buddy circles, so you can meet with people that have run it to get your advice and guidance from it. It's a guide, so as Raj said, it's not always a cut and paste in every organization. So these are the top tips of how to make it work, and then you adapt it to the culture or how you do things in your organization. So Tea Break is a solution that encourages brave conversations throughout your organization. It creates a safe environment to discuss a selected topic with regard to race inequality. So examples are microaggressions versus banter, which is a hot topic, or talking about hair, talking about mental health and Black colleagues. So actually the staff, your colleagues, will decide what is the themes and topics to talk about. We know a lot of organisations did something on the anniversary of the George Floyd murder, or when the 3 England Black footballers missed a penalty, because it had a real impact on them, but it enabled the organisation to get their thoughts. It is a fantastic way to hear the honest voice and thoughts of colleagues across the organisation and to take action. Now, the way it's done is typically like this on Teams or Zoom. So you can be open or you can be anonymous. You can put initials in there. You can communicate by putting something on the chat. So it creates a safe environment. And we've done this also in partnership with Mental Health First Aid England to make sure that before, during and after a tea break, your staff are kept, you're looked after and protected if there's any risks and everything. The next one you can see, Big Promise, which I touched upon, and then Safe Space is the third one. The way Safe Space it was to tackle is about our voice is not heard. So we touched upon race networks are very good places for support, but they don't have teeth, or they can't make change in the organisation. So Safe Space, the way it works is you bring together 3 to 5 EXCO senior leaders board members, and up to 10 ethnic minority colleagues. That ratio is very important for the power dynamic in the room. It's facilitated. Quite often it's suggested an external facilitator comes in a protected environment. What it enables is brave conversations. It facilitates uncomfortable discussions, and it drives meaningful action. So the way it works is it's like a sort of 2-hour session. The first session is the senior leaders EXCO can ask questions which outside the room could be risky for them to say, or they may not feel comfortable to ask. For example, what's the problem with the term BAME? We know it's a really hot topic. We have a BAME network, or why are we changing the name, etc. Or microaggression. I've been saying this all my life. Is that banter or microaggression? But it's a safe way where, I call it education light, if that makes sense. The second part is the 10 ethnic minority colleagues represent the wider their wider peer group, brings to the table 3-4 key issues for that organisation. So it might be, and I think Raj alluded to it, we're doing really well at entry level, recruiting people from different backgrounds. But what we're finding within 6 or 7 months, a lot of Black women are leaving. Or we do really well at entry level, but within 2 years, very few of us get a promotion. So they can bring these problems and challenges to the table, to the senior leaders, who then walk away or leave, and then come back within a few weeks and say, right, you gave us a few challenges here. We're going to tackle 2 challenges with you. Challenge 1, our chief person officer is going to work with you and we'll form a one-off task and finish group. We think that problem will take 3 months. So they publicly go in the organization, we're going to tackle problem X with you. The second problem, we think is a bit more challenging. Actually, chief exec is going to be the key sponsor for that. Again, form a different task and finish group. It might involve HR, it might involve D&I, it might not. But the representatives will have a say in that. And we think this is going to take 12 months. But for the first time, the voice of ethnic minority community is being heard and actions taken. It's all about action, not just a talk shop. So there's some of the key things. And the next one, next slide, please, is a new solution called My Name Is, which you may have heard about. And a quote is, a person's name is the greatest connection to their own identity and individuality. It's the first thing we're given from birth, sort of thing. So, however, from polls that we've carried out, 73% of people from ethnic minority communities saying their names are often mispronounced. And they say it makes them feel disrespected, not valued, not important, that they don't belong. What we're proposing is for everyone to start having using phonetic names as well as their original name. 95% of those polled and said it would help tackle race inequality in their organisation. Now that can be, so obviously when we were introduced at the beginning, we shared with Wally our phonetic names, so can get it right. On application forms, so when you're calling someone for an interview, you're getting their name right, because many of us will struggle with a name that we're not familiar with, and we appreciate different dialects will have different pronunciation, but it's a chance to get your phonetic name right. If you can go to the next slide. So because of the support of Green Park and in partnership with Edelman PR, fantastic global firm, we've created this kind of tool. I'm not very good on this sort of stuff, and it just takes me 90 seconds. So you just type in your name, as you can see in this case, ANUJ, and then it comes up with an option, ONU. Now that might be right in some dialects, but not in others. You'll see on the third image there's a press down arrow, and it will give you other options. So you can choose another option if you're not there. So as you can see on this one, it's come with AANOOJ. So that'll be Anuj. Now, if your name is not on the phonetic, you can put it in there and then it'll upload the database. So in future, Anuj will have it on there. So don't walk away. We need to rebuild this. We've already got 500,000 names and it's growing daily. We need every name on there. Next slide, please. So basically, also what you can do is you can upload your photo, then download it and use it in social media. So if you just hashtag My Name Is on whatever social media tool you use, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., you'll hopefully see loads of these doing it. But what is brilliant, or I find inspiring, is people are sharing their story. There's a meaning behind the name if you get it correct. And that was given to them by their parents at birth for a reason. But when they are given a nickname, or it's can I call you Anne, you take away that. So if you read these stories, they're really heartening. So why wouldn't an individual or an organization not support this? So if you go onto the tool, it'll provide all these opportunities. And again, as Raj mentioned, because of the support of Green Park and others, it's free. So please promote this in your organizations. And then we're also proposing on your email footers, you put your phonetic spelling. On your social media, you put your phonetic spelling. When you meet a client, you ask for their phonetic spelling of colleagues, so you don't, exclude someone whose name you're not comfortable with. And we do know that people don't interview people because they're concerned how they may say their name, so they're written off. But if they had a phonetic spelling, that will make a difference. We've heard nurses in hospitals are now asking for the phonetic names of patients to make them feel comfortable at the beginning. Huge difference like that. Next slide, please. I think that's it, is it? Yeah. So Race Equality Week, we're doing some events. Tomorrow, engaging senior and middle managers in the drive for race equality. So some organizations are struggling for this. So we've got some experts here, as you can see on there. Race Network leads, DICE, which is a diversity expert connected to Green Park, and Skanska and HS2. And then we've got a closing event at the end. Do come along to where you'll be able to hear what other organizations have done for Race Equality Week to give you ideas for Race Equality Week 2023. So you've got a year to prepare for it. Next slide, please. And press again. So we, I said we are a not-for-profit. We do need funding. So these organizations are supporting us and collaborating with us. So if you want to make any donations, I'm from a charity not-for-profit background. I will ask. but that keeps it going and keeps it free so everyone can be included. And as I said, like that, my name is, please do promote it to your colleagues and your networks and your organizations. Back to Wally, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Javed, and thank you, Raj. Really inspiring talks by you both, and you can see the kind of response we've been having in the chat. So a huge thank you to you both. And I'm sure this is just a beginning for many people to keep the conversations going as we've discussed. So we've now got a Q&A slot. So we've received a few questions. We'll try and answer as many as possible. So if you just bear with me while I get those up, and we'll be putting them to Raj and Javed. Okay, so the first question we've got is, how can we fight racism in cases where it is subtle and nuanced with little evidence, and it is often thrown back at the victim who fears victimization and gaslighting? Oh, sorry, Raj, you might need to unmute. Sorry.
I don't know how I do that every Teams meeting. So I think it's always subtle. The idea, the history I had of being chased down the street by the NF or them trying to burn down our shop, attack us with knives. It's not like that anymore. I mean, of course, in some cases it is that kind of visceral, violent racism, but in the workplace, it's always subtle. And a lot of HR departments don't know the difference between micro assaults, micro insults, or micro invalidation. So for them to help, they need help. But I don't think it's our job or part of our job to defend ourselves in the workplace. When people go to work, they're paid to act in a certain way within certain behaviours in all organisations. So it's really for the organisation to support and put the benefit of proof in processes that are trusted. And that doesn't mean they knee-jerk to solutions, but it does mean that they're more trusted. And that, I think, comes from more transparency, more accountability, whether it's a 9-box grid for performance. We call it the Faisal test. You've got two guys, they both work in the same organisation. They're both late for work 3 or 4 days on the trot. With one guy, there's a relationship, they can go to the pub and say, listen, why are you late? But with Faisal, nothing happens because either the manager doesn't know Faisal or isn't that, hasn't got that relationship. So it's much more likely that leads to official performance management. So really the onus here is on management and HR to deal with that more proactively, which of course is a challenge in the short term because management and HR often are not themselves diversity confident or willing to create the conditions where they get uncomfortable because everyone's trying to do their job. But bottom line, people are getting paid to act properly in your organisations. If they do not do so, then you should be able to go to your leaders and say, this is what I'm experiencing. You sign this charter, you take the money, you do whatever it is. It can't be empty words anymore. And that doesn't mean everyone's guilty of everything, right? I say that properly. But what we want is a bit more transparency. And there are ways to do that for no additional money, just by putting leadership focus on it.
I think it's worth adding to that also. When we created the Big Promise, what came out was actually exactly that, in the sense of, for calling it out or dealing with it is to come from senior leaders, managers and allies. So instead of individuals having to take it and then, as you said, being swept under the carpet, it's for other people to call it out. Now, if an organization is truly, anti-racist and inclusive, that will happen. So quite often, it isn't just yourself or your peers who've been doing it for years. It doesn't change. You need others, who have the say and the power to do that. So that's on 3 of the different stakeholder groups. So in the future, when people see it, they will call it out in a meeting themselves. That's not acceptable, etc. So I think that will change the dynamic because and then it will change the culture where people realize, actually, I can't be doing or saying these things because I will be called out by the, in this case, the majority, not the minority.
Brilliant. Thank you both. The next question is, how can we support career progression for Black, Asian and minority ethnic employees within organisations lacking ethnic diversity in higher paid roles?
Well, it's quite complicated. So there's, of course, a recognition that if I can't see it, I can't be it. So that role model is important. But ultimately, what people want is a trust in that they will go up or down based on their own performance. And that performance and the opportunity to perform will be equal. So a great deal of that comes down to succession planning, which is management, performance management, which of course is management, leadership, investing and focusing mid-management on how they want the organisation to look, feel, which for me, sorry for using consultant jargon, but that comes back to the board saying this is our target operating culture. Not the one that we want, but the one that we need to deliver our promises. And this comes down to then every promotion, every pay review, every new hire, is that person a culture fit, i.e. they fit what we've got now, or is that person a culture add, i.e. they take us closer to where we know we need to be of the most value to our service users. And it takes a bloody brave board to do that. So even taking half a step in that direction at board level is material when you get down to the middle of the organisation and people just feeling something has changed and it's not just chat.
Thanks, Raj. Javed, did you want to add anything?
No, I think it's a really good question. And again, it's I guess the reason why it's a good question is it was identified as a real issue, and it's in one of the big promises how to support your staff, etc. And you know, it includes things like reverse mentoring to get to understand what's blocking. So the thing is, you know, we had an event yesterday, and Frank Douglas mentioned about, you know your market, in this case, know your employees. You know, what's stopping them, what's blocking them, what needs to be done differently. If you don't have them conversations, you can't address it.
Brilliant, thank you. So the next question is something you've already touched on, and hopefully people have learned about throughout the presentation, but it goes, how do we ensure that people are engaged all year round and that inclusion isn't a tick box exercise? I know we kind of answered it already. So.
Javed, do you want to go first?
Sorry, I was just reading a thing. Can you repeat that, Wally? Sorry, I do apologize.
How do we ensure that people are engaged all year round and that inclusion isn't just a tick box exercise? Yeah,
I don't know the full details, but I do understand. I think Wales has got something called Race 365, which, you know, it's a policy from the national. So in this, it is 365 days, and I think, you know, I call them, or pop-ups. You know, so again, Race Equality Week, it's the start of the year in one sense, not the end, or a week and then wait for race. What's going on throughout? I think it's really important. Some questions I was saying there is, you know, you need to be asking your colleagues and employees, you know, is change happening? And I think change is only happening. What we've identified, the organisations where change is happening, so that, you know, we are talking about all the time. It's on the agenda all the time at board. You know, it is there. And I think, like Raj said, it's quite easy for, okay, let's focus on gender now or disability now, and then race ends up, you know, okay, in 3 months' time, we've got Black History Month. Let's do it again then. It's got to be on, but it will impact, everything we do will impact on all the other characteristics.
Yeah, Wally, I think that the short answer to the question comes in two pieces. So the first piece is, being a good organisation is everyone's job. So if this unlocks talent or produces more productivity from people you've already got, then why would you not do it all the time? It's part of people management, is the biggest part of management. The second thing is, you know, there are free tools, structured tools with how-to guides on the Race Equality Matters website. You don't have to do them all in the same week. You know, you can empower people in the organisation or in affiliates or across organisations, and it's good to see so many different organisations get under your banner. You know, to create groups where actually you're using these free services to stimulate debate and empower people to decide on what priorities we're going to focus on. because boiling the ocean makes it impossible for leaders to get anything done. And sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's ours. So it really is about focusing on what makes the most material difference to the kind of organisation you want to be, and then just pinpointing that. Move one step at a time, I would say.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to mention also, there's a lot that you've mentioned that we've been doing at Wiltshire Council, such as reverse mentoring. We run a pilot and we're hoping to roll it out further because it's a really successful pilot. And I think things like that really help to keep those conversations going. So the next question is, how do we prevent people from becoming desensitized from important topics around race equality?
It's really difficult because, of course, a lot of people don't care, right? I mean, I'm assuming people are on this, they care, or at least they think it's important that they're upskilled in it. But a lot of people don't care. We had a FTSE 100 construction engineering client that we outsourced a lot of their diversity for 14 months. And in the end, we had to get all of the senior, we trained the top 300, then we had to get the top senior people in the room and say, this is the reason why you should care, right? And it's to do with, you've got shortage of bricklayers, so you can't do what you're supposed to be doing. You lost 60 women to other competitors for talent. You got none back the other way. And there's a stat about women going on maternity leave, going back into the industry, but not coming back to that client. So for them, the skeleton of their argument was around talent. And whether you're interested in diversity or not, you had to be interested in talent. And within the NHS, it's often the clinical argument. Certainly, there's a lot of evidence for that in mental health provision. So in each organisation, there is that hardcore skeleton that says this is how it helps us do what we need to do. And with many of the people on this call, I'm sure they're facing, less money, more diverse workforce, really difficult choices to be made. And the heart of any successful strategy is what you decide not to do. So this gives a lens onto how to better serve your communities, but only if that lens is polished and looked after properly and allowed to flourish. But for me, it's about making this integral, not having it on the side.
Brilliant, thank you, Raj. And Javed, did you want to come in?
No, the only thing I'll say, I'm acknowledging, I think, and I hope I'm saying it correctly. Kemi mentioned on the my name is database. It hasn't got that many African names or African descent, and we acknowledge that. I think we didn't have time to make it perfect, but the idea itself building. So I appreciate him. I do know that more are coming on every day. So it's but if we just waited, it will never happen. Phonetic is easy. Why haven't we done it decades ago? I've seen some people have sent their cards on here showing they've gone phonetic, which is brilliant. So I think, but going back to desensitize, we could just, okay, we're not going to do it because we haven't got it perfect, or we're going to upset people, etc. We want to keep it going. So it's just doing these little things and then learning. So I pick up what you say, Kemi, and it's really important that we acknowledge it. But hopefully, if we're communicating in a year's time, you'll notice far more names are on there. Thank you.
But you don't need 100% buy-in. If you're a listed company, your stock price is incredibly important. Not all of your staff care about it, but they're all working towards it, and that's how we should be thinking about inclusion.
Brilliant, thank you both. So I've got a couple more questions from Chris Kidd at Wiltshire Council. The others, by the way, were anonymous, but so Chris has asked, first of all, what one thing should Wiltshire Council do differently to tackle race inequality?
Am I supposed to know? I haven't done an audit on Wiltshire Council. I mean,
any advice?
I think if you had to pick something on the basis of being asked, a question like that, I would say get some terms of reference for your ERG, and the governance of that terms of reference to be reported into the leadership team of the board. Yep. So there's a link between what they see, what they feel, and how that might affect and get access to decision making. Doesn't mean decisions will be made differently, but it does mean that ultimately it's not just chat. There's a real relationship between people's lived experience and how the leadership team are choosing around decisions.
Thank you. And sorry, the next question was again from Chris. What can employers do to challenge white racism in relation to the experience of gypsy and travellers, which is seen and understood differently to that experience by non-white minority ethnic groups?
The lived experience of prejudice is the same, whether that prejudice is experienced through racism or sexism or, homophobia. As a leader, as a business, your job is to create an equal playing field for your staff, isn't it? No one says, yeah, sign this contract, but you're going to get paid 20% less. So I think the reality is, as with anything, like, if you put SAP in, you might put one element of the computer system in at a time, but you always construct it so that everything benefits when it's plugged in. So for me, I think it's a bit about mindfulness, it's a bit about kindness, but the other 90% of it is about leadership, commitment, and trust in the organization. So I think you can all split these down into different characteristics and different communities having slightly different problems, but from an organizational perspective, it's about what kind of culture and trust have we created in our business for everybody.
Thank you, Raj. And Javed, did you have anything?
No, the only thing I'd say is that's why I think we formed the Race Network Leaders community. So actually, and there is picking up what Richard, if you go onto our website, we do have, and I think some of you, Dr. Carl George, talking about how to power the Race Network by terms of reference and governance, but actually that they're not a side volunteer arm as part of Fluffy. They're core to the business. And tomorrow we've got an event where we've got a Race Network leaders talking about how the business, they're a core part of the business now and making a difference. So it's giving them power and realizing they are a real asset as a community group, and they feel they have a voice and they have power and they have seats at the top table. So it's so easy to do. It's I think, well, Raj, is the top table willing for it to happen?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I think that's all we've got time for. So I'd like to thank you both once again for an amazing webinar. We've had lots of comments saying how inspiring and amazing it's been. So we can't thank you enough for your time and sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. Thank you to everyone who's logged in, and we hope you found it useful and it's inspired you to keep those conversations going and to do something different to move the dial on racial inequality. Also, as both Raj and Javed have said, there are many other events. So this is only we're only midway through Race Equality Week. So look out for the other events and initiatives you can take part in. So just go to raceequalitymatters.com. I'd just like to mention, with regards to the recording and slides, I will discuss with Raj and Javed with regards to the slides, but I can say that hopefully, if the recordings come out okay, then we will upload it and then we'll send it out to everyone who's registered. Anyone who's come in directly through the link, what we'll do is we'll put the link on the Eventbrite page that you used. So just maybe check again in a couple of days for that, or maybe beginning of next week, and then it should be there. And also hopefully it'll be on the Race Equality Matters website as well. So that's all from us. Thank you again. And yeah, so hopefully if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. But apart from that, I hope you enjoyed this and benefited, and hopefully see you again in the future. Thank you very much.